What's up, my wizards? It's Dev and Ziggy here. Got Ziggy with me the first time, like all spoiler season. Where you been? You know we like magic, and today we got some more of them hot boy Ikoria spoilers for y'all. I know you've been waiting on them because today's cards were super hype. We've had a couple of days so far this week of just like, oh, there's some good commons and uncommons. Check those out. Maybe a rare in there here or there. You know, it's a good, decent thing. You know, maybe one or two standard playable cards per day this week. No. Today we got to see some like actual serious juice. So let's go ahead and get in there because we got a lot to cover. Let's go ahead and start the slow build with some commons and uncommons that look at least decent and limited, and if nothing else, I should point them out because they're cards that exist in the set. First of all, we got to see a cycle of uncommons that are all humans that gift a keyword ability to non-humans. We saw Keen Sight Mentor, which is 2 and a white for a 1/4 human cleric, and when it ETBs, you put a vigilance counter on target non-human creature you control. You can pay 1 and a white and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with vigilance. Now, we also saw a black one just like this that gives the creature lifelink instead of vigilance, and we saw a red one as well that gives the creature menace rather than vigilance or lifelink. So pretty cool little cards here that'll probably be role players in limited, but nothing more. But like I said, I wanted to go ahead and point them out because they are cards that exist, just like Bushmeat Poacher and Sanctuary Smasher. Smasher looks pretty cool. A 6-mana 6/4 Rhino Beast with first strike and cycling 2 into red. When you cycle Sanctuary Smasher, put a first strike counter on target creature you control. So Crawworm has really come a long way, and a Crawworm with first strike is really, really good in limited. Like, that's freaking phenomenally fantastic. So I actually like this, even if you never actually, cycle it, but there might be a case where you use it as a combat trick every now and again, but I want a top-end 6/4 first strike. That seems great to me. So really helps mitigate some of the problem with Crawworm's usual stat line in that 4 toughness ain't really that much for a 6-mana guy, so giving it first strike is a huge deal for combat. But Bushmeat Poacher is a 4-mana 2/4 human soldier. You can pay 1, tap it, and sack another creature to gain life equal to that creature's toughness and draw a card, which seems pretty decent. And if you want to, facilitate any sacrifice shenanigans, any aristocrat style stuff in draft or sealed, then maybe this is a good card to look at. But it's, again, not too exciting. Won't make it anywhere out near, out of that format, but it might be a decent common piece for a very specific draft deck. We also saw Farfinder and Zenith Healer, but this is pretty much the end of the non-business cards that we saw. Pretty much everything else is ridiculous from the last couple of days, but Zenith Healer is just 1 and a white for a 2/2 human cleric, and whenever you cycle a card, you gain a life. And of course, you can cycle this for just 1 mana as well, so I think we now have 5 total cards. Actually, it's 6. It's 6 total cards now that cycle for just 1 mana, and we might see even more. There's like 100 more cards in the set we haven't seen yet, so right now, I think we can play like 24 things that cycle for 1 mana in a cycling deck, and that seems pretty good. And honestly, cycling whenever you draw, or gaining life whenever you cycle, is not bad. I mean, it could keep you alive in some games. Maybe it's okay, but the actual creature itself isn't much to write home about. I'm mostly excited about getting yet another 1 mana cycler. But Farfinder is 3 mana for a fox. It's a 1/1 with vigilance, and when it ETBs, you may search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle your library. This is pretty cool for a few reasons. I mean, obviously the art is amazing, and it's colorless without being an artifact, which you don't see too often. That's kind of cool. It's also a non-human that any deck in Limited can play that fixes their mana, which is really, really sweet. Another way to fix your mana in Limited, so that's nice. It's common. You can mutate stuff onto it, give it, and it has vigilance too, so it's got a keyword ability when you do mutate. So I don't know, there's a lot of cool things this does in Limited to tie certain ends together, and I tend to really like cards like that, but it doesn't really do anything outside of Limited. Or wait, actually, I missed one. There is one more kind of meh, but still a little bit exciting card from today, and that's Sonorous Howlbinder. This is all of these keyword ability lords have really weird names, but Sonorous Howlbinder is 3 mana, 1 and then 2 Rakdos hybrids for a 2/2 human warrior with menace, and each creature you control with menace can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. So menace it just becomes a super ability, and that's actually pretty neat. There's been a lot of menace payoffs, more than some of the other keyword abilities from what we've seen so far. Again, 100 cards left to be spoiled, so I'm sure there's going to be other keyword ability synergies, but we just seem to be getting more for menace than others in the build so far. But I don't think this makes a menace deck playable or anything, but it's going to be playable on a budget level, and that's what I like to do. So it's going to be fun playing the menace deck and swinging with 2 guys and they're completely unblockable. But all right, let's get to the stuff. Here's Zenith Flare. I love the name of this card. You know, on the other hand, this card has an awesome name. It sounds like an anime move. Like Zenith Flare! It's 4 mana. 2, a red and a white for an instant. Instant, y'all. Zenith Flare does X damage to any target and you gain X life, where X is the number of cards with a cycling ability in your graveyard. Now, I don't know if this card is good. I can't... this card's probably not very good, but I'm going to play it. Me and like every other YouTuber on this site are going to try and make this card a reality and just try to 20 someone with it just right off the rip. But that's going to be tough. It's going to be tough because it doesn't seem like the best card in the world. Even if you cycle for the first 3 turns of the game, you're only hitting for 6 with this, and you didn't affect the board for 3 turns. So... good job on that, but the dream, obviously, is to just dump your entire deck into your graveyard, whether it's self-mill or just, you know, getting a bunch of mana and cycling everything in your hand. And then eventually on turn 10, if you can control the game up to that point, just dome them with this for the win. And there are ways to do it. We've already got, up to this point, like I said, 24 different things that cycle for just 1 mana, so it's not too tough to cycle on your turn and then leave mana up to do other things like counter spells or sweep the board or whatever. So it might take you a lot longer than you wanted to, but you can eventually hit them in the face for a whole bunch of damage with this spell. And in the meantime, you might even be able to spend this spell on killing a threat on the other side of the table, so long as you have things that can cast it out of your graveyard or put it back into your hand later in the game. And we've got ways to do that in Standard. There's also the fact that we've got a few fairly potent copy spells in the format. We've got the expansion half of Expansion Explosion. That's a really cheap way of copying this spell. It still costs 6 mana, but it's really cheap, right? There's also 1,000-Year Storm. Ral, you can play the 4 mana Ral that -2s to copy a thing, and that means on the turn that you play this, you don't have to spend any extra mana copying it. So it could work, and that might be the most effective way of actually hitting your opponent for 20 is just cheating extra copies of the spell. But, you know, there's multiple routes you could go with this, whether you play some sort of self-mill cycle amalgamation and you just try to throw your entire library into your graveyard in a couple of turns and then cast this for the win. There's a lot of different ways that you could brew a deck like this up that uses this as a win con, and I'm going to try them all because this card's really exciting to me, even if it's not the best card in the world. Now, moving on, we got to see 2 more of the companion cycle today, and we're almost wrapped up on that cycle. We'll start with Giganta the Wellspring right here. This is 5 mana, 4, and then a Gruul hybrid for a 5/5 legendary elemental elk. Oh no, more elks. Obviously, it has companion. And the restriction here is that no card in your starting deck has more than one of the same mana symbol in its mana cost. Now, you can tap this to add 1 of each color to your mana pool, but you can't spend that mana to pay generic costs. Now, as far as the restrictions on these companion creatures go, this one looks like one of the easier ones to meet. You don't get access to some really good cards, and Nissa comes to mind, I guess, but at least this takes Nissa's spot on the curve, and I guess realistically you're going to be wanting to play it on turn 5 in every game anyway, so it mitigates having to not play Nissa. But once you do get it on the battlefield, it does all kinds of stuff. I hate that it can't cast a Golos, but it sure can help you activate a Golos, or anything else with a bunch of colored, mana costs in there, like Niv Mizzet, for instance. Seems really, really good with this. And this can just tap to cast a 3/3 Krasis just by itself, let alone whatever other mana you might have laying around. So at the end of the day, that's going to make a big old Krasis, right? So, and you can play Hydroid Krasis in the deck this card is in, but you don't really have to cut that much. There's very, very little opportunity cost to building around this card. Aside from, yeah, you have to build top-down around this card, but not really. At the end of the day, it doesn't feel like you're building top-down because you don't have to make too many concessions to play this card and just get like a basically free play on like a 5/5, which is a stout body in and of itself. That also gives you a lot of advantage on subsequent turns. So I actually think this is one of the better companions. Even if it doesn't look that exciting to begin with, it's still like one of the lowest actual costs to make this your companion, and that counts for a lot. But up next, let's look at a card you know I'm excited about, and that's Ikoria the Orphan Guard right here. 3 mana, 1 and 2 Selesnya for a 3/2 legendary cat beast, and it's got companion. Each creature card in your starting deck is a cat, an elemental, a nightmare, a dinosaur, or a beast card. Ikoria has vigilance, and each other creature you control that's any of those creature types gets +1/+1 and has vigilance. So it's both a cat lord. Hey, Ziggy, it's a kitty lord. He's looking right at it. Actually, you have your eyes closed. But it's a cat lord and a Nightmare Lord, and a bunch of other lords, you know, Beast, Dinosaur, there's a bunch of types on here, but Cat and Nightmare, yes, that's two of my, like, I've said it in the last video, these are like effectively my two favorite creature types in the whole game, so I get a Lord for both of them in the same card. And again, the opportunity cost on this might be really low. I don't think that this sees a whole lot of standard play because I'm not sure how strong these creature types are, but Beast is a very strong creature type in the current standard, and I'm sure that you can find other creatures on the curve with these creature types to make a somewhat formidable deck, and this is just a free play for you that just happens to anthem all of your creatures and give them vigilance, which is actually a pretty strong boost, all things considered. So I actually really like this. You know I'm going to be trying to play it on day one. You know that. So I can't tell you how excited I am for this. Is it just going to be Selesnya cats? Is it going to be Abzan cats? You can play Cauldron Familiar, and you can even play the other companion that's a cat nightmare. Haha. And then you can like cast stuff out of your graveyard with that. But this is still your companion. It could totally work. It could totally work, and I want to... that's going to be a deck. That is going to be a deck that I play in ranked this season. I don't care if I go all the way down to copper or whatever. What is it, bronze? It's bronze. It's been a while. Now, there is something else to get excited about today. Actually, there's like 5 more things to get excited about today. But one of the things I'm most excited about today is the return of a spell type, sort of. These aren't reprints at all, but we have seen cards like this before, and it's always hype, and they almost always make a splash, too. We saw the return of ultimatums today. Let's take a look at the Sultai one first. This is Emergent Ultimatum. It costs 7 mana, and it's a sorcery. All ultimatums cost 7 mana and are sorceries. All of them cost 3 different colors of mana. In this case, Emergent Ultimatum costs 3 green, 2 blue, and 2 black. Search your library for up to 3 monocolored cards with different names and exile them. An opponent chooses one of those cards. Shuffle that card into your library. You may cast the other cards without paying their mana costs. Exile Emergent Ultimatum. Well, the fact that this has kind of 2 things going against it makes it my least favorite ultimatum revealed today, but that doesn't mean it's a bad card. You still get 2 cards for free, but it costs 7 mana up front to get 2 cards for free, and you can't guarantee which cards you get. That's my first problem with it, is that your opponent has some control over what happens with this card. And the other problem is that you have to search up monocolored cards. So obviously you can't search up Casualties of War. You can't search up another copy of Emergent Ultimatum. That would be a little bit broken. And you can't search up other ultimatums. You can't search up anything multicolored, which really cuts down your options a good bit in this format, where you can't go get Teferi. You can't go get a bunch of really high impact planeswalkers and spells. So I'm a little bit worried about some of the restrictions, but there are still plenty of ridiculous monocolored cards that you might want to go grab, and no matter which 2 your opponent gives to you, they might win you the game. So card might be really insane, but it's the one I'm least impressed by, although it's still a ridiculous card. But let's move on to Eerie Ultimatum here. This is the Abzan one, and I really like the name. Eerie Ultimatum. I love the art too, but this one too, 7 mana for a sorcery. It costs more black than it does green or white. Return any number of permanent cards with different names from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's crazy. Just spend all game self-milling yourself, and then suddenly, boom, it doesn't matter if a bunch of the creatures in your graveyard have the same name. I really don't think it matters that much. This does incentivize you playing a bunch of 2 and 3 ofs and stuff rather than 4 ofs, but I still think you can have a few creatures in your yard that are of different names, but you still bring back like 6 things with this. Either way, and you're in the money. Like, this is just probably better than Command the Dreadhorde if you have the mana to cast it, or you're in these colors. And Abzan is heavily incentivized because of a few cards we've already seen in this set. If anything, I hope this set makes Abzan playable. I love the Abzan color combination. I've always wanted it to be good since the last time Siege Rhino was in Standard, but it really hasn't been good since then. So maybe this brings Abzan back to prominence, or it's just an impossibly hard spell to cast. We've actually already seen the mutate creature in Abzan that mutates for 7 mana, and that might take priority over this spell. Or this spell might be insanely broken in a deck that can cheat it out for whatever reason. So I'm interested to see which of these 2 cards kind of wins the fight for better Abzan thing that brings all your stuff back from the graveyard. But either way, it's an exciting spell. But moving on to the other ultimatum spoiled today. Here's Ruinous Ultimatum, the Mardu one. It costs more white to cast than it does black or red. Destroy all non-land permanents your opponents control. And that's the entire text box. So a literal one-sided wrath for everything. It's a planar cleansing for 1 more mana that doesn't disturb your own permanents. That's decent, considering we've already seen Planar Cleansing see a tiny amount of play in the current format. So this could see play in a Mardu-centric deck, or perhaps a Fires deck of some kind that incorporates the Mardu color combination. It would be great in that. Just a one-sided rat that kills literally everything. Planeswalkers, creatures, enchantments, artifacts. That's good. That's a good ultimatum, y'all. If you're going to cast any one of these, I think this is probably the best one, all things considered. And I think there are definitely decks chomping at the bit to want to play this. Honestly, I think that Mardu Fires has been wanting to be a deck for a while. It just doesn't have quite the right stuff. But now it's got both this and Captive Audience at the 7 mana slot if it wants to play a bunch of 7 mana spells. But it probably won't play Captive Audience. More likely leans towards this if it plays any of those. This will be its Casualties of War, and it's probably a much better card than Casualties of War if you can cast it. So I could definitely see it possibly happening. Let me just put it that way. But I'm not sure because you lose cards like Teferi, right? But you still get your Deafening Clarions, your Shatter the Skies, your Red Cavaliers. So maybe we'll see a shift to Mardu. I think this might be a really good card in Fires, but either way, it's a freaking awesome card. This is a ridiculous Magic card. And the last thing I'll say about all these, by the way, is that just once, I want to see a game where somebody does all 3 of these. Right? Not one player, but both players. Like, one player casts Emergent Ultimatum and gets 2 things to put on the battlefield. And then the next turn, the other player responds by casting Ruinous Ultimatum on their turn and just blowing away the 2 things that just got searched up by Emergent Ultimatum. But then when it comes around to the original player's turn, they just cast Eerie Ultimatum and get the stuff they originally searched up with Emergent back from the graveyard. I want that sequence to take place. Oh, but whoop whoop, we got Planeswalker alert, everybody. Here's Narset of the Ancient Way, which spells Gnaw, which is kind of how I feel about this card, honestly. It's 4 mana, 1 in Jeskai colors for a 4 loyalty legendary Planeswalker with an Narset type. And you can +1 her to gain 2 life. Then you add blue, red, or white to your pool, and you spend this mana only to cast a non-creature spell. You can -2 Narset to do the good mode. Draw a card, then you may discard a card. When you discard a non-land card this way, Narset of the Ancient Way deals damage equal to that card's converted mana cost to target creature or Planeswalker. You can also -6 Narset to get an emblem with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this emblem deals 2 damage to any target. So the emblem is kind of easy to get, especially if you focus on getting it through Proliferate and stuff. It could be somewhat easy sort of get. Takes effectively 3 turns to get it from the turn you put it out, but you maybe could, and it's not that consequential of an emblem, which is why it's like it seems slightly easier to get, maybe, but if you do want to put this down and +1 it 2 turns in a row, you're not protecting it at all. You're not protecting it whatsoever. And you can't even use its +1 ability to cast a creature that then protects it. You can play a spell that creates a creature to protect it. Maybe that's a thing. But I guess you can't even Satyr's Cunning because the creature that Satyr's Cunning creates can't block. So, but whatever. It's going to be really, really difficult to generate a creature the turn you play this to then block for your Narset. So I'm not sure how much you're actually going to be +1ing Narset. It really looks like the weakest ability on the card. And since you're not going to be +1ing it very often, I'm not sure how often you're going to get to the ultimate. Even if you do get to the ultimate doesn't look amazing unless you're planning on casting 6 non-creature spells in 1 turn. But there are decks that can. There are certainly decks that can, so I don't count it out. Now, when it comes to the -2, that's the ability I like right there. That's the chef's kiss. That's a good ability, and you might be able to do it a whole 2 times. You might be able to do it twice. That's when it's really good. Not only do you get to draw a card, but you get to blow something away, and that's really sweet. Now, this does require that you have, a card with a decent converted mana cost in your hand if you actually want to destroy a creature. And then that card, again, has to be able to kill that creature. It has to be a 3 or 4 mana thing if you want to actually be able to blow away a real threat with the -2 on Narset. So it is kind of conditional, and sometimes it's going to force you to discard a thing that you really don't want to discard. But that said, there are other times where you discard a Chemister's Insight, blow that thing away for 4 damage, and still be able to cast the Chemister's Insight later. So this definitely works with some stuff pretty well. but I'm still not sure that's enough to really carry it. The ability that protects itself in a pretty meaningful way, yes, because drawing a card is good. Discarding a card can easily be turned into an upside, and blowing away I think is good too. But again, it's conditional on you actually having something in your hand that's big enough and you don't mind letting go. And those are actually some pretty tight restrictions. So I'm not sure how I actually feel about this, but I could definitely see some decks that just get the emblem and start going nutso. It's also really good on curve with Riel. I want to point that out, but so is our next card. Here's Song of Creation. This is the last card of the day so far, and it's absolutely crazy. I saved it for last because I love this thing. Song of Creation is 4 mana, 1 in Temur colors for an enchantment. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Whenever you cast a spell, draw 2 cards. At the beginning of your end step, discard your hand. Actually, I've just received confirmation this isn't the last card of the day. I just reloaded Mythic Spoiler. I got a legendary Boros Fox to talk about. But when it comes to this card is bananas. This card is absolutely every synonym for broken that you could possibly, summon up. And I know, it's a 4-mana do-nothing enchantment. That's bad. It makes you discard your hand at the end of the turn. It's terrible. All those things are so bad, right? No, it's not. I also had to make a notes on my phone to talk about all the stuff I want to talk about when it comes to this card. First of all, I just want to say it's not necessarily a do-nothing enchantment on turn 4, because you might play it and then drop another land, in which case it kind of did a thing. But anyway, some people on my Twitter timeline said that Sundial of the Infinite is an awesome combo with this in Commander. And I'm not going to talk too much about Commander because I rarely do. I'm not going to pretend I know a whole bunch of crap about that format when I haven't researched for it at all, because I just don't. But when it comes to Commander, Sundial looks really, really cool because you can just end the turn while this ability's on the stack, and it exiles the ability, so you don't have to discard your hand. How do you feel about that? Pretty freaking good. But when it comes to Standard, you've got adventure creatures, so you can cast adventure creatures, keep them in exile till later. So it doesn't matter that you're discarding your hand. You can still cast the creatures, draw more cards. That's good. What about Jumpstart? I was just talking about Chemist's Insight, but both that card and Radical Ideal and a Radical Idea and a whole host of other, Jumpstart cards would be really sweet, because not only when this forces you to discard them, are they effectively not discarded, but again, a Chemist's Insight is basically like a draw 4 for 4 mana when you have this out, and it's very good. So Jumpstart cards, but also escape cards. This is the same colors as Euro, but all other kinds of escape creatures too can go pretty well with this stupid thing, because again, it doesn't matter that you have to discard them. It's actually great because it fuels escape. For that matter, it goes really well with Underworld Breach. It's something else that a lot of people on my Twitter timeline informed me of, but this was an easy enough one to figure out. I already had this one in my head by the time everyone had told me about it. Underworld Breach goes super well with this because it feeds Breach, and when you play the spells out of your graveyard, you draw more cards, fuel Breach even more, so these cards could go super well together, obviously. I'm sure that nothing broken can come of that. There's also Riel. Again, when I previewed Riel, I was like, I don't know if there's really an effective way to discard cards and get value out of this. I just keep getting proven more and more wrong every day. A card like this effectively just loses its downside if you have a Riel out, because you discard your hand and you just draw all those cards, so you just wheel every turn if you have a Riel in play. So that's probably pretty good. There's also Escape to the Wilds and Light Up the Stage and spells like that exile cards, because, Escape to the Wilds... you play it, and it's like not having to discard your hand at the end of the turn. When you untap in the next turn, you just have a billion cards to play off of. So that's, Escape to the Wild seems good. It's also in the same color combination. Same thing with Live the Stage, all that. There's also things that just draw you a card when you do stuff, or draw you an extra card every turn. The Great Hinge draws you an extra card whenever you play a creature, so you'll draw 3 cards and stuff. That seems pretty good. The Royal Scions just sits on the board and draws you a card every turn. Teferi just sits on the board and draws you a card every few turns. Chandra, the 4-mana Chandra, that exiles a card every turn, which is effectively like drawing one. Same thing with Narset, the 3-mana Narset. So there's a ton of stuff that can fuel this card in the Standard right now. Anything that draws extra cards, anything that plays out of the graveyard. There's just so many ways to keep going with this. But, I'm not even done talking about it, actually, because you could play it like an Experimental Frenzy in kind of a more aggro-oriented deck if you wanted to. You're probably going to end up splashing blue. Let's say you played Gruul. You splash blue for this on turn 4. Why wouldn't you just play Experimental Frenzy in that case, actually? is one way of putting it, but maybe this could actually be better than Experimental Frenzy if you're abusing Jumpstart and Escape and stuff like that. And kind of a Temur aggro deck, because I envision that this would probably be pretty good in a deck that's pretty much out of cards in its hand by turn 4 anyway. That way you completely mitigate the downside of it. So there's so many angles of looking at the card from, and whether you play it in that aggro deck I'm talking about, or the combo deck that it's much more likely to go into. This is a super impactful card, not only for the Commander format, but for competitive formats. Not only Standard, but I'm talking about farther back than that, where the combo potential is even higher. Whew, this next card actually feels like a come down, but from that last one, I mean that Temur enchantment is just busted. That is a broken Magic card when set up correctly, and it's not hard to set up correctly. But anyway, I swear to God, I'm done. Here's Zirda. Zirda the Dawnwaker, the Ninetails of the set. This is a 3 mana, 1 and then 2 Boros hybrids, 3/3 elemental fox that's legendary. And its companion restriction is pretty freaking heavy. Each permanent card in your starting deck has an activated ability. Abilities you activate that aren't mana abilities cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that cost to less than 1 mana, of course. You can pay 1 and tap it to have target creature not be able to block this turn. So this is strange, a little bit weird, because first of all, its activated ability, its own activated ability, begs to be in an aggro deck, right? But like, there aren't going to be like too many straight up aggro creatures that have activated abilities either, right? So it's kind of just seems to be at odds with itself. Plus, you're just getting a 3 mana 3/3, which isn't like great, it's at least decent stats, and that's true of most of these companions, that like you're just getting decent stats, and really the value of it is in having a free card, just drawing an extra card turn 1 of the game that you know for a fact you have and isn't able to be snagged by agonizing remorse or thought erasure. I mean, like, the companion ability is very strong. And just having access to a 3 mana 3/3 whenever you want it throughout the game is pretty decent. Again, especially with that Temur enchantment. Works with companion too. But anyway, I'm just going to keep talking about the Temur enchantment forever. That's my channel now. When it comes to this, I want to be so much more excited about it because Ninetails is like actually my literal like favorite Pokemon. It's either that or Alakazam. I'm not actually sure, but I love There's actually a Ninetails right here. That's what that card is. I don't even know if you can ever tell because the sun's usually on it. But yeah, that card back there is a Ninetails. I love Ninetails. So I want to be more excited about this, but it's actually the restriction on it is so high, it's going to be really tough to make sure that every permanent has an activated ability. I will say this lets you play non-permanents. It lets you play a bunch of non-creature spells and stuff, instants and sorceries, and get away with it. And that's kind of cool. So maybe it goes, well, no, it doesn't go in Feather because Feather doesn't have an activated ability. What does it go in? Like, I'm just not too sure. Maybe it goes in like a heavy artifact deck. You play this in like Gingerbread has an activated ability. What am I thinking? Steel Overseer has an activated ability. Oh, we're getting somewhere with this, actually. You play it in the Artifact aggro deck, and you can tap this to make sure that things can't block your huge creatures, and you've also got Gingerbread to not be able to be blocked, so you get like an unblockable artifact deck. That's my take. There's got to be way better stuff. That sounds so bad. That sounds so bad. But maybe it's possible this goes into something, but it's gonna require some very heavy brewing because I'm pretty sure like even when you cast it, you're not really getting much. You just don't seem to be getting that much from it. The restriction is ridiculous. But it is a Mozilla, and I'd be liking some Mozillas. Actually, I use Chrome. I use Mozilla forever, but now I've been using Chrome for the last couple of years. I like it, Ziggy, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. I like Boros Firefox as like a concept, but this on the tiers of cards I'm excited to brew around, and this is definitely something that you want to brew around, right? This is probably like in the top like 30 somewhere because there's just so many like crazy cards I want to brew around from this set that this comes in there somewhere, but it's behind a bunch of other cards. Let me just put it that way. But I'm pretty sure that we're done. Me and the Zigs are done for this one. You awake, buddy? Yeah, you're good. You're all right, man. You shed like crazy. How do you do it? Like, I guess you're getting your summer coat. You got to get all this winter stuff off of you. I understand. I got to lint roll this couch. But anyway, I'm done for this one. So just like the video if you got the time to do it. I think you might. I hope you do. If you're that strapped for time, it's crazy that you watched a 30-minute video, but you don't have the 5 seconds to like the video. Subscribe if you're new, or if you just haven't done it yet. Hit the bell for the notifications. Check out the Patreon. $1 a month is all I ask to vote on what decks we even do first this season, which is real power in your hands for just $1 a month. So go over there, and if you want to pre-order any of this stuff or sealed product from Ikoria, hit the link in the description and go over to TCG Player, and anything you order through that link will help you do that. So yeah, do all of those things, and I'll be back with another spoiled video tomorrow. I promise you that much. Still like 100 cards in this set. There's a lot to look at. So I'll be back. Just let me know how you felt about all them takes down there in the comments section. I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.